On your Wednesday episode of Locked On Raptors, the Toronto Raptors take down the Chicago Bulls, and they do it by playing differently and with different versatility in their lineup choices. Yes, the Raptors have different ways they can play now. We're going to dig into why that is. We'll also talk about Scottie Barnes, a.k.a. Swatty Barnes, and so much more with Katie Heindl here on a Whatevs Wednesday. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome to episode number 1350 of Locked On Raptors for Wednesday, March the 1st, baby. In like a lion, hopefully out like a lamb. I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 9 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on Twitter at WoodleySean. You can follow, subscribe to, rate, and review the podcast for free on your favorite podcast apps. And we are, of course, on YouTube for free as well. Please go hit the big red subscribe button over on the Locked On Raptors YouTube channel. We are very close to 3,000 subscribers. I love round numbers. Please help me get to the round numbers so my brain is happy and content. And I thank you very much for doing that in advance. And thanks to all those who have already hit subscribe and joined our Locked On Raptors family over on the tube. All right. On today's show, the Toronto Raptors take down the Chicago Bulls 104-98 in Toronto last night before they jet out on a long road trip against some important and also good opponents. But nice to get this win in the bank. They are 31-32. They finished 8-3 in February. They've won 8 of their last 10. And Katie Heindl is here to break it all down. Katie, the Raptors are playing interesting basketball again. This is beautiful.
Yeah, they waited to pull it out until the 4th last night, but pretty compelling stuff. I mean, last 12 minutes.
Hey, that's what you have Scottie Barnes for. The first 3 quarters, you never know what you're going to get, but 4th quarter, he's coming in and taking the bull by the horns, and you'll love to see it. We are going to talk about Scottie Barnes coming up and the performance he had last night, his 4th quarter block fest, and just the general intriguing nature of his growth path this season. That'll be our focus coming up. We got the good, the bad, and the coming up later as well. But let's begin with our biggest takeaways, shall we, Katie? And to me, this game just kind of screamed, oh, wow, the Raptors are, in fact, different now. With Jakob Poeltl, now with their full complement of players, with Fred VanVleet back. Congratulations once again to Fred and his family on the arrival of Layla VanVleet. So sweet. But let's, on the topic of just the Raptors looking like a different team, for me, it's that they don't have to play one way to win anymore. We saw them last night close with their small ball former starting 5 that is no longer their starting 5. Had Jakob Poeltl on the bench, of course, with the option to bring him back in if they really needed that rim protection, but they held up just fine. We're seeing they can play different ways on offense now. They can run the stuff with Jakob Poeltl at the elbow, run off ball actions. You can have Scottie or Pascal initiate. Obviously, Fred VanVleet in that pick and roll with Yak has been awesome as well. Even on defense, they have different ways they can play. We saw their defense look like a crunch time weapon for the first time in ages. That's the thing I've missed most this season, Katie, is just the lack of any sort of juice on those late game defensive possessions. For you, do you kind of agree that there are different ways now for the Raptors to win these games? And what kind of optimism does that give you going forward here down the stretch as they make this push for maybe even the 6th seed, as they're, I think, 5 games in the loss column behind the flailing Brooklyn Nets, with the Miami Heat and Atlanta Hawks in front of them as well? Just sort of general thoughts on the fact that the Raptors don't got to play just one way to win basketball games anymore. It's beautiful. It's wild. What a novel concept.
Not as optimistic as you. I don't think they're making the 6th seed. I think every game from here on out is just going to be like a game-to-game win, and they have to treat it as such, right? To your point, yeah, they have more than one way to win, but I would argue before they didn't have a way to win. So anything is an improvement on that. But I think last night, you saw in the deficit that was their shooting throughout the game. Yeah, they did figure out other ways to do it. I think they forced the Bulls into 20 turnovers. There was a lot of second chance opportunities, kind of more defensive pressure. I think Jakob Poeltl has really made that easier for everybody. I think he's freed up, Scottie Barnes, OG Anunoby to a degree, certainly Pascal Siakam, to kind of go out and specialize in doing other things and not have to focus so wholeheartedly on just getting bullied and kind of bodied around the basket. Jakob can do that. He's turned into a great passer, which I think has opened some things up, for the team. And to your point of like way more rotational opportunities, I will kind of lean on. I don't think he said this in a mean way or like a judgmental way, but post game Fred said like it's funny to be trying out different rotations this deep into the season with like Jakob getting there now, also with Will Barton playing, but that's also kind of been the team's MO all season long, is not settling on any solid rotation because they didn't have the flexibility.
They didn't find one.
Or freedom. They didn't really have it. And now I think, you've got your starters. I like where they are sitting with their starters in terms of like locked positionality. It was the first game we also saw like everybody back and healthy and available since the deadline. And that looks good to me. I think Will Barton will probably end up doing more than he did in his brief exposure last night going forward. But yeah, I think overall, like it's still going to be a struggle, but the shooting is still worrying. That could just be like slumps and dry spells kind of adding up all at once and everybody getting gelled back to playing together again. But yeah, they looked more competent. They had more like offensive punch and energy. A lot of that came from Scottie Barnes in the fourth for sure. OG Anunoby dunking on DeRozan didn't hurt either. But I think there's like more, they're like a little bit more zesty than they've looked to me all season. And that bodes well.
As a fan of the zesty cheese Doritos over the regular standard nacho cheese, I really appreciate that analogy, Katie. I also just realized I have Vivek Jacob as the background up on the page here. I'm a fool. There we go. It's fixed. Sorry for the YouTube folks out there. Most importantly, sorry to Katie.
It.
Yeah. I'm a fool.
Shout out to Hydro Jug. The best thing in the ground home from All-Star.
Anyway, now that my lack of good production value has been taken care of, I think, the shooting, certainly, that's going to be the limiting factor, right? And that's why I think they went small down the stretch, even though the Bulls skew pretty big and, Nikola Vucevic was having himself a pretty good game. I think there was just a game where they needed the extra shooting on the floor and the extra spacing, and obviously Gary Trent Jr. paid that off big time, 5 of 11 off the bench, 28 minutes. That's kind of the perfect role for Gary Trent Jr., I think. If he is going to come off the bench, he's going to close sometimes if he's hot, and if he's not, then you don't have to close with him necessarily. You can go with a bit more of a dependable option, more of a metronome type, and like a Jakob Poeltl, who you know exactly what you're going to get most of the time. But like in that instance, they needed to juice the offense, and that lineup historically has been excellent late in games offensively. I think because there are 5 options to score basically at any time, and the defense has to make bad decisions and leave good players open and with extra advantages to press. So, just having that option to go small after not really playing small for the last couple weeks since Jakob Poeltl arrived is really nice. And the other thing too, Katie, to the point that you made about just the rotational flexibility they have, the minutes were down in this game. Siakam just 34, OG 34, Barnes and Van Vliet 35. That's incredible to see. You get 10 players play in this game, 9 get meaningful rotation minutes. And because you have that depth now, which is, I think, pretty real depth, you are able to not, you can rely on, you don't have to overcome, I'm saying this poorly. You can overcome bad performances from some of your core guys in a way that they were not able to do earlier in the season. It was basically you had 5 guys you needed to be the same brand of excellent every night to win. And now, Fred VanVleet can go 1 of 9 from deep, still do other good things, which we'll talk about later on. But you can still survive it because you have Gary Trent Jr. going 5 of 11. You get a Chris Boucher pop, even with a lesser game from a Precious Achiuwa, for example. You just got other dudes who can chip in, which is very, very nice, Katie, having more dudes, huh?
Yeah, that's good. I feel like 35 minutes is a breezy walk in the park.
Honestly, like it must feel like a 4-day work week for them. Just like, oh, it's done now. It's Thursday. Oh, great. We're going to come back on the other side, talk about Scottie Barnes, Katie. Swatty Barnes, as they're calling him now after that fourth quarter exploit against the Bulls. We will dig into his growth. We'll dig into what we saw from him in the Bulls game in particular and get a little bigger picture with it as well, as his development arc is super fascinating and obviously very important to what the Raptors are doing going forward. We'll get to that in just one sec. Before we do that, however, got to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel, the #1 sports book in North America. You got to go check them out. It's the NBA, just past the All-Star break. It's the stretch run of the NBA season. That means there's lots of great ball happening, lots of different places to throw some action down, if that is what you like to do. And because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000, there's never been a better time to sign up with FanDuel. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to three-pointers drained. I would go and guess the Raptors are going to hit less than their typically projected number of three-pointers, but you want to go the other way with it too. You have that freedom. You can also combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. That is my favorite way. Whenever I do partake in sports betting, which isn't very often, but when I do, it's usually I'm at a game, I'm in person, I want to juice up the live experience, and a same-game parlay for that game is always a great way to do it. For example, over the weekend when I was watching those games in Detroit and Cleveland, putting a little money down on the Raptors and a few different players, more or less points, that is a fun way to make that live experience even more fun. Don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA and of Locked On. We continue on here with your first listen of the day. Katie Heindel from Dime, Basketball Feelings, and the New York freaking Times, among other places, is here as we continue to dissect this win over the Bulls. Puts the Raptors again at 31-32, ninth in the Eastern Conference, just on the heels of the Hawks and perhaps the Heat as well, who... I don't know, Katie, the Heat are looking a little decidedly not Heat-like of late, but we can talk about that another day. Today, we're going to talk about Scottie Barnes, who in this game, 11 points, 8 boards, 4 assists, 1 steal, 4 whole blocks in that fourth quarter. He was a team best plus 19, shot just 4 of 12 from the field, but was 2 of 3 from deep. We will talk about his issues scoring around the rim, I'm sure, in this segment. But Katie, impressions of Scottie Barnes, it's been... very different for him since Jakob Poeltl arrived. Of course, before Jak's arrival, he was essentially playing center full-time, screening, working from the middle of the floor offensively, and he was having great results. January was the best month he's probably had as an NBA player so far, or at least the very best month he's had this season. And it's been a little different in February with the arrival of Jakob Poeltl and the change in just the dimensions of the floor for the Raptors and how they're operating. So he's been kind of assuming this more wing-centric role. He's being asked to shoot more threes. He's being asked to create with the ball in his hands a little bit more, which has kind of had mixed returns. Impressions of Scottie Barnes last night in the game against the Bulls, and then sort of bigger picture thoughts on his development arc through this season, which has seen him have to adapt to a whole lot of different roles and change in a pretty short amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's at where I expected him to be at. I don't think regression is the right word, but maybe the plateaus included.
Sure.
Especially when asked, to your point, to take on so much and so many different roles throughout the season. Some of that I think planned, some of that the result of loss of personnel and, injuries and just being asked to step up and into things. Last night, I really liked it. I thought he looked super confident. He looked very aggressive. It would be great to be able to harness some of that, not just in the fourth. But I think that's when you see, I just kept thinking of what we've heard of him, which is he hates to lose. We've heard his high school and, college coaches talk about that. I think that's what you see in him starting to get stirred up last night in the fourth, all those blocks included. I like Swatty B better as a nickname than fourth quarter B.
Oh, you've teased my bad in the good, the bad, and the coming up.
Okay, yeah,
that's all right. We're gonna go deep on that because I have some thoughts.
But overall, I think it was good. I liked the sort of disrespect of getting the rebound from OG's missed free throw and then just immediately dunking it and then going into a chase down block in the Bulls' last possession. Didn't need to do it, just felt the need to do it. I like that kind of stuff for him. So again, I think he's had a really tough season. I've never been on the side where I think much of that criticism is warranted. I don't know what you what you realistically want to expect from a second year player who's just come off like a rookie of the year type season, and what he's like been able to show and been able to do with all the challenges that this team has had, and the frustrations, I'm sure, of where that's put him. For sometimes like not really having a clear leader or somebody to sort of look to this season, I think he's done pretty well. I think if the last few games, certainly like since the deadline, have been any indicator, you're seeing like definitely like a more like purposeful, robust kind of player in him. And overall, yeah, I mean, the team needs an offensive spark. Like certainly every single game is a close game. I think every game in the next like month and a change of remaining games will be close given the schedule. So if he can provide that kind of offensive spark, Fred was saying he was out there talking a lot. He kind of gave Fred and Pascal the boost that they needed at times. That's good. Like, I think that's what you want from him. So where maybe, yeah, he had a quiet shooting night, to our earlier point, he did a lot of everything else.
Yeah, I think I continue to be super high on Scottie because these fourth quarters and these stretches of games where he just kind of decides, all right, this is my game now. I'm taking over, and I'm going to assert my sort of authority in whatever way I see fit, whether it's, driving to the bucket, scoring over Brooke Lopez 7 times in a row to force an overtime and a fake comeback, whether it's having four blocks in a fourth quarter and kind of, as Nick Nurse said, inspiring the rest of the Toronto Raptors defense with that energy and just sort of fervor and like ferocity. Like that's awesome to see. And I think for me, yeah, it maybe I could see why you'd look at his numbers. It's basically, it's very similar, although his assist numbers are way up. His shooting numbers are actually down, which I want to talk about a little. But, just because those fourth quarters are so clearly like him just kind of taking over and realizing he can assert himself into a game, that's why I remain optimistic about what he's going to be long term. He has those flashes, and those flashes are so bloody tantalizing that I'm all right with the sort of in between spots where he's kind of figuring things out, or he's having struggles that I think are to be expected for a 21-year-old who, again, is playing, like you said, on a team that's not had a lot of continuity this season. There's been a lot of in and out of the lineup, a lot of changing of his own role. And I do think long-term that's going to benefit him because he's getting to try different things and is being asked to perform in different roles over the course of a full season. Like, that has to be good. I kind of think back to, it's not the exact same, but like Zach LaVine back in the year where he kind of had to play point guard for the Wolves because he didn't have a point guard. But like, he added a lot to his game because he was in those sort of adverse circumstances. And I think we're seeing that with Scottie Barnes as well, where he can kind of do anything, right? He can play in the middle of the floor. He can work with the ball in his hands. There's got to be some improvement there, I think, in terms of like the reads, the shooting accuracy, that type of stuff. But, I think we see again last night that all the reasons to be very bullish on Scottie Barnes and the reasons to think that this team, which the Raptors have clearly wanted to see more of, there's a reason to think there's something to build on here with Scottie Barnes as that sort of agent for upward mobility around what is already a very good supporting cast for him. So pretty exciting stuff. The shooting numbers, Katie, little interesting. So last year he shot 71% at the rim. He was in the top quarter of the league in terms of at rim percentage. He's down to 64% this season. We've seen him struggle with that sort of in close, just finishing in close quarters around dudes, looking for contact, unhappy when he doesn't get the calls, that type of stuff. A couple of and ones that have kind of rimmed out and whatnot too. Are you concerned about that? Is there like a level of like, okay, maybe this is just a thing he's always going to struggle with? Is there something you're seeing in the way he's playing that gives you pause? Or do you think this is just kind of young guy ironing out some kinks and he'll get back to where he was at last year and probably better over the course of the coming, even by the end of the season or over the course of the coming years?
I mean, I don't think he's found his shot yet, so I think that's why he's struggling, like in terms of where he's most comfortable shooting from.
Yeah.
I do also think some of this is just par for, he's been asked to, like, sometimes he's the primary ball handler, right? Like sometimes his role is not to shoot. So I do think you've got to take that into account when you look at, the diminished numbers overall. Generally, I think the slump plateau. Feels normal to me, feels fine. The finishing is a little bit troubling just because I think that's still like a very nagging and persistent problem for a good deal of the roster. Like Pascal Siakam will sometimes, you know what I mean? Like that's something that like I feel like I've talked about for at least 3 seasons now, where there'll be like really frustrating bouts of just like not finishing, like you just aren't committing to it. I don't think like Pascal chases or looks for calls in those instances, but maybe that's the only part that I worry a little bit for Scottie in terms of like you don't try and finish because you want the call. You try and finish because you want the point. The call is a bonus, right? Like you can't start playing looking for that. So that's a bit, I don't like that because it does kind of remind me of, bad Raptors iterations of old. When you can't really like, this isn't a team that's like going to really get the calls when compared to some of the other, opponents that they'll play that do.
Sure.
So I think that's like just a bad rut and routine to get into. But I would hope that's maybe just, what I said before about like, they're not always being a clear example to look to. Maybe that's some of what that is, for him. So hopefully they're just kind of coaching him to play through it.
Yeah, and I think I'm probably not super concerned about it long term. Like this year, certainly, I think it's probably going to persist as a struggle as he works through it. But I think in time, like the calls will come. He'll get stronger. You learn how to sort of fight through contact. This is part of the growing phase for any guy who's going to live at the rim in their NBA career. And I don't think I'm terribly worried. And I think the reasons why, like, he's getting to the rim more this year than he did last year. He was at 36% of his shots came at the rim last year per cleaning the glass. This year it's 39%. So a slight uptick. We're also seeing him down in terms of the frequency he's taking mid-rangers, which is good because it's not really a shot that's his and not really a shot that you want anyone but like the best players at mid-range shooting taking. And so, he's obviously there's some sort of package there from the mid-range for him that I think can be worked on and built out as we go forward here, but it's not there just yet. So really, it's rim and threes for him right now. The threes aren't falling, but I'm glad he's taking them. He's shooting 34% from the corners. He hit 2 of 3 last night. He's been better of late. And when it comes to getting to his shots around the rim, like he still gets there with relative ease, right? He can blow by anybody he wants or just bully through anybody he can't blow by. He can score over some of the best rim protectors in the NBA and get to those spots where he's comfortable. And I just don't think we're going to see a replication of this big drop off from last year going forward. I think we'll probably see him get more comfortable in those spots just because of just eye test wise. He gets to those spots kind of at will. And that to me is more important than figuring out the touch around the basket because these guys are professional basketball players. I'm sure they can figure out the touch part of scoring from a foot away from the basket. And Scottie Barnes seems like he's going to have that. Any last stray thoughts on the growth of Scottie Barnes here before we move on to our good, bad, and to round out the show?
I think it's more consistency. And that I say that and not expecting that to come in someone's second season.
Yeah.
But it is something to strive towards. So whether that's in finishing moves, whether that's in, I don't know, like shot fluidity or like who he's kind of looking for, the consistency is something that like you want. I would like to see him on track to get to. Tough when he hasn't had consistency or like the team hasn't really had team-wide consistency this season. But I think something that's like when I look at him and think of where I do think he's struggling a little bit or there could be struggles coming up, I think consistency would smooth a lot of that out.
Yeah, I think I very much agree. It's like a consistency of like aggression, I think, as well is a big thing for him. Just be mean all the time,
maybe
Scottie.
Just like intentionality.
Don't save the meanness for the fourth.
Right? More than aggression, because I think intentionality to me, that's like your energy is focused, especially like your offensive energy is focused, and that's going to lend to the finishing and like some of the other problems that we're talking about. Just like aggressiveness that can kind of backfire to like around your team as well.
I think that's extremely well put, Katie. We're going to leave it there. We're going to come back on the other side, get to the good, the bad, and the to round out the show. Before we do that, go and make sure you check out Locked On Leafs as your second listen of the day, as the Leafs are making trades literally every day, it seems. So go and get the latest from Mike and Dave over on Locked On Leafs. And if you're an NHL fan, this Friday, there will be a Locked On NHL trade deadline special live stream from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern time. So if you are a puckhead, you will have your fix. So please go check it out on the Locked On NHL channel. Also, Locked On Leafs, wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube. All right, Katie, we reached the good, the bad, and the way we round out all these game recap-y shows here on Locked On Raptors. A thing we liked, a thing we didn't like, and a thing that's got us a little intrigued going forward from the latest Toronto Raptors game. What you got for your good, Katie? Start us off.
The OG dunk, I think.
Oh!
Yeah. One, I think he needed it, right? Especially because I've seen some questionable stories basically lamenting, like, this is why he should have been moved at the deadline. Like, look at what a failure he's been, given it's been, like, I don't know, 5 games or something since. Not a lot of time. And I disagree with that. So I think just in terms of, like, we know he's like a defensive, like his defensive mind is great and full and beautiful.
Ask DeMar DeRozan about that. He was on his ass all night long, and it was not pretty for old DeMar.
But his just like enough, he needed like an offensive punch, especially because the shooting hasn't been there. So I liked that a lot.
Holding DeMar DeRozan to 13 points, no rebounds, and 2 assists is
good.
That's something else. That might be my good as well. Actually, my good is Jakob Poeltl's play extension. The way that like he can make it so a dead possession becomes a not dead possession, just in like with a setting of a screen or with a quick pass from the elbow. That's amazing to me. There was a possession last night in the first quarter, I want to say, where they ran an action with Yak at the elbow. They had a whole bunch of stuff going around off ball. And the Bulls, because they're good at defense now, somehow, were able to snuff it out really quick. They get down late in the shot clock, and instead of the typical, all right, I guess we just toss it to Fred or Pascal or Scottie to try to bail us out by hunting a mismatch here, they improvise it into a quick pick and roll with Yak and Fred VanVleet, and you get a 3-point play out of it for Jakob Poeltl. Like, just having that quick instant offense that can bail you out is so nice. That kind of goes back to the diversity of options the Raptors have now. They can play different ways on offense and run different stuff and use different, two-man combos to create advantages. And just a very small sample size theater thing here, Katie, but Fred and Yak so far have played 81 minutes together in their time with the team since Yak's return. The Raptors have 121.8 offensive rating when they're on the floor. That would be the best in the NBA. And they have 101.8 defensive rating, which would be by far the best in the NBA. A plus 20 net rating. The Golden State Warriors starting lineup has a plus 21 net rating at last check. That's a really, really good set of numbers. Very small sample, of course, but Yak and Fred, those two together, is pretty tight. Let's get to the bad, shall we, Katie? What you got? I've already kind of alluded to what mine is, but what's yours?
There was one sequence, and again, like, this is a small thing, but there was one sequence in the fourth one. I think there were 3 wasted rebounds, and then they would just kind of get flung out to, I think it was like Pascal. Yeah. Probably one with Scottie. Anyway, just like taking a very weird kind of hero ball 3-point shot versus at that point being like doubling down and being like, well, I'm going to just drive it. Yeah. Because we've now got the defense so stretched out toward us that there's plenty of room to, cut down the lane. So I didn't really like that. I think I guess it's kind of ironic because we're talking about all these other ways that the team has to win, but there are still these kind of moments of a lack of what would you call this? Just like spontaneity and offensive decision making. Sure. And some of that I think is confidence and also just not being lazy. It's like when you've been shooting horrendously, from 3 all game. I get shooting through it, but at that point, I think you're like, we're probably not going to shoot through it this game. So I didn't really like that. That stuff is sort of frustrating to see. And again, it's like, that's a bad, I think, rut for a team that like can't rely on shooting to get into offensively. So I didn't really like that.
Yeah, unless it was Gary Trent Jr. taking a 3 last night, I wasn't feeling great about anybody putting them up. Although Chris Boucher 3 of 5, baby. That's nice stuff. My bad. You mentioned it earlier. Fourth quarter B. Matt Devlin. I love you. Former guest of the podcast. We adore Matt Devlin so deeply here. It's a pro Matt and Jack and Alvin and Kayla and Savannah podcast. We love the Raptors broadcast. But boy, oh boy, fourth quarter B gotta go. Katie, thoughts on fourth quarter B as the nickname that Matt Devlin is trying to make happen for Scottie Barnes?
I mean, I don't think it's sticking around because
I really hope not, but like
right
Freddie
before-
All-Star did for a while.
Well, right before we went into the segment, I Googled it. Like I looked it up on Twitter because I wasn't sure. I was like, was that it? Because it's such an awkward, weird nickname that I had to be sure. So by virtue of that, I do not think it's sticking around.
I'm just going to double check Basketball Reference to make sure it's not been added to his list of nicknames, because if it has been, we might be screwed, Katie. It's not. There is no nickname listed for Scottie Barnes as of right now.
Which feels right. He hasn't, he doesn't have one yet.
No, well,
that's fine.
He does have one now.
Well,
it's Scottie Barnes, Katie. We're making it happen. Fourth quarter B, it lionizes the thing that we're finding annoying about Scottie Barnes, which is that he waits for fourth quarters to do this stuff. Would prefer 4 quarters be. How about that? That would be much better. It's just, why is he B? His name is Scottie. That's like a super, like Barnes is a pretty nondescript last name. Scottie pops. It's like, oh yeah, like even just fourth quarter Scottie, like that would be better. Fourth quarter B, anything B with Scottie Barnes is just like very, very underwhelming to me. I don't like it. I love you, Matt Devlin, but please, please, please stop trying to make fourth quarter B happen and start using Scottie Barnes if you'd like. I'm just saying you can freely use that on the broadcast, Matty D. Let's get to the shall we, Katie? What's your from this game?
Probably Will Barton. I just
mine too. Look at that synergy.
I knew we probably wouldn't see a ton last night. It's more to just get him in the lineup, and I think Nick Nurse and the coaching staff are sort of figuring out how and where to use him best. But I honestly, I think it is such a good pickup by the Raptors. I've been such a Will Barton fan for such a long time. He hasn't done a ton with the Wizards, but he hasn't been playing.
Yeah, playing for the Wizards probably saps your joy a little bit as well, I would assume.
But as someone who was such, I think a crucial part of some very competitive Nuggets teams, been to the playoff 3 times, 11 season veteran. I think he brings a lot to the team. Good offensive creator. I don't know. I think just his presence in the locker room may address some of the worries I had alluded to earlier. But yeah, I'm just very tantalized to see more.
Yeah, only 4 minutes from him last night. You could very much see he was asking Thad Young where to stand and stuff on some of their that's totally what you expect. I would imagine it's going to take a little bit to get him sort of worked in, but yeah, I mean, just to have that optionality, right? If Thad Young's not giving it to you, you need a little bit more shooting and offense in those secondary units, then Will Barton can take up the 17 minutes that Thad Young played last night. You could invert the 17 and 4 that those two guys played. You can pair him with your sort of less shooting heavy, Precious Achiuwa, Chris Boucher duo, and he's a 38% three-point shooter this season. He's not been very good from two-point range, also 38% from two-point range this year, but the Raptors need threes. The Raptors need someone who's just willing to just put it up at some point and finish possessions. And as much as he has very much struggled with the Wizards and some of the sort of catch-all metrics paint him as one of the worst and least impactful players in the league this season, again, I feel like a lot of that's context, and you never know when the right situation is going to come around for a guy like this. And as a ninth man option for the Raptors, I really, really like it. And I also think he's going to join the hallowed halls of guys who you can't believe were Raptors at one point, like Jeremy Lin and Jason Thompson, all these buyout dudes. Yes, PJ Tucker. Yeah. He's right in that sort of that Jason Thompson zone as, oh yeah, I remember that longtime NBA player who had a cup of coffee with the Raptors. It's not fun. I'm fully in on the Will Barton thing. don't think it changes the sort of big picture for the Raptors necessarily this year, but will make the little picture game to game a little bit easier to navigate, I think, for Nick Nurse, just having that extra option there. I do wonder what this does to Jeff Doughton's playing time, considering he'd been having a bit of a run there, but at times you need the offense that a Will Barton can bring that Jeff Doughton just hasn't quite shown fully capable of. That said, you need a defensive ace guard. Jeff Doughton's your guy. Options, it's incredible. We've tied it all together. The options are unbelievable. The Raptors, a team that aren't just all 6'8" dudes who play the same way. We love it. Katie, we're going to wrap it there. Thank you so much for hanging. It must be just the worst having to talk to my goofy ass early in the morning. Maybe we could do these later in the afternoon. I feel like I've been shot out of a cannon today. Thank you for enduring. Anything you would like to promote for the good people?
It's great to keep it in the mornings, Sean. It's good. What can I promote? Did we do that? We did this last week. Did we?
I don't know. We didn't.
We didn't.
Did we? No, we did.
Know.
We did. We talked about
did.
All-Star. That's right.
Yeah, we did. Okay.
But still, promote the New York Times thing again.
Yeah,
Why the hell not? You're the New York Times.
Still online. I mean, it's still floating around in magazines somewhere, but it's still online. You can read it there. You can read Basketball Feelings. I've just put out it's like a 17-minute freebie podcast for everybody, but it's got some really nice insight from Stuart Sohi, Andrew Schlecht, Kyle Mann of The Ringer, and some other people, just about their best memories of this past All-Star. And then I should have actually something about the Kings, the self-actualized Sacramento Kings.
Light the beam!
And why they're for real. Like, it's still great and fun to joke around and light the beam, but it's actually, they are a for real team. And that will be on Gaming Society later today.
Hell yeah. Go check that out. Find me on Twitter at WoodleySean. Follow, subscribe to, rate, review the podcast for free on all your favorite podcast apps. Go make your second listen of the day. Locked On Leafs. Or also, you got all the other Locked On NBA shows. If you're interested in all the hoop that's going on around the league, it's been some very good hoop. Go and listen to Locked On Kings, for example, with our pal Matt George, if you want to accompany that with Katie's piece on the Kings that is forthcoming. Either way, thank you so much for supporting the show. Again, the YouTube subscribers, we love you very, very much right now. My brain really wants us to get to 3K because my brain likes round numbers. So thank you for helping in that effort. We will talk to you again tomorrow. Likely going to do a mailbag show tomorrow as we get ready for the two road games with the Washington Wizards that could, in fact, bring the Toronto Raptors back above 500 if they sweep them both. What a world we live in. We'll be back again tomorrow. Have a good one, everybody. Bye-bye.